Coalition here in Madison, Wisconsin. I am a community activist and organizer. My day job is a racial justice consultant / trainer. That's what I do for a living.
Michael Johnson, I'm President and CEO of Boys and Girls Clubs of Dade County.
I am Glenna Shawley Malone, and I am currently the Director for Student Diversity and Inclusion here at Edgewood, and this is my 3rd year here.
My name is John Leonard, and I teach in the Religious Studies Department at Edgewood College.
It's a national movement of young people across this country that's speaking up on the injustices that is taking place in cities all across America. And I'm glad that so many young people are speaking up against these injustices and stepping to the streets so the voices can be heard. I have personally been in communication with some of these young activists from Madison to Chicago to Philadelphia to St. Louis, and I'm actually glad to see that young people are stepping up and allowing their voices to be heard.
I can tell you the mission of Young, Gifted, and Black. Black Lives Matter movement is a national platform organized by Opal and a few other women, non-conforming women. And their platform might differ a little bit from us, but Young, Gifted, and Black, we are affiliated with the Black Lives Matter movement, meaning that when something happens, when someone in our community or nearby is murdered at the hands of the cops, then we respond by organizing, activating the network through Black Lives Matter to give resources and to make connections.
It was started by 3 African American women who identify with the LGBTQ community. And I also know that the movement or organization really became prominent or kind of more known in the community or the world really following the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, or what I call, just to be transparent, the execution of Michael Brown by a police officer in Ferguson. And as the riots kind of erupted with that, really became nationally recognized, and they really kind of started as, from my understanding, an organization that really wanted to bring a voice to those individuals who identify as LGBTQ within the Black community, because as we know historically and just culturally, that's often a population that's silenced or not really talked about a lot in the Black community, especially within the Black church traditionally. I think it's transitioning a little bit now, but historically that's kind of one of those conversations that Black families just don't really discuss. And so really wanting to bring empowerment to that population and a voice. And then as with social media and in the last few years, as we've seen the increase in executions by police officers of Black bodies, they've kind of been at the forefront in protests, movements, raising awareness, kind of all across the nation, and have kind of been, again, just at the forefront of those movements.
I think when you look at historically some of the challenges that our country has faced, young people always have been at the forefront. So even during the civil rights era, you had people who were in their teens, their 20s, and their early 30s who were instrumental figures in fighting a system that oppressed people of color. And so I've heard about the Black Lives Movement locally here in Madison. I keep up with all the issues that take place in our communities all across the country. And I'm glad to see that not only is this organization stepping up and speaking out, but other organizations are doing the same thing. What I will say is that we have some challenges in our country. When you look at disparities in education, disparities in mass incarceration, disparities in income, those are real issues that we have to face. And I think that folks who are associated with Black Lives Matter, it makes people feel uncomfortable because they're challenging the status quo. And I think it's okay for that to happen. In America, if we don't challenge one another, it don't mean we have to agree.
Right.
But if we don't challenge one another and at least hear perspectives that come from different voices, that only make us stronger as a community, makes us stronger as a region, and ultimately a stronger nation.
Thank you. So what does the movement mean to you personally?
You know, I looked at the platform, right? And so the Black Lives Movement has a national platform around economic injustice, about empowering Black Americans. You look at addressing the issues around mass, incarceration, community control over laws and policies that impact their community, our community. And so for me, it's given the work that I do with kids across this country, and particularly in Dane County, it's encouraging to hear young people's voices being heard. Whether people respect those voices or not, those voices are being heard, and I respect that. Now, I may not agree, and some may not agree with the methodology in terms of how you get to resolving some of these issues. And there's no, like some people will say, well, you have established community leaders like yourself, and then you have grassroots community leaders, then you have young people that may be associated with groups like the Black Lives Matter movement. You need a multitude of different voices and action plans to address these issues. There's never going to be a single strategy or solution to solving these problems. And so for me, what it means is it's an opportunity for people's voices to be heard. It's part of a fellowship where people can get together around a common issue, and it's an opportunity to challenge the status quo.
Within 1/3 of a second, Google had located 3,280,000 results, which means this is being discussed widely in theological circles, in religious studies, in the way that people are thinking about and living religion in America today. So it's got quite an impact in just these few short years.
Is to fight the state, and the abuse of power, specifically police brutality, and the high incarceration rates. And we've chosen that platform in that area, the criminal justice arena, to fight in, because we view the criminal justice system as new slavery, Jim Crow, as a plantation, and we see police officers as the overseers of that plantation, of that system. So that's the reason that we've chosen to fight that arena first, and that is the platform and mission, as well as mission for Black Lives Matter, as well as that they are against police brutality and abuse and oppression by the state and the systems. So yeah, that's what we're doing, and the reason that we started and formulated here in Madison is right after the murder of Mike Brown in Ferguson. We started mobilizing in the area and started asking, what does oppression look like here in Madison? What does the system, what does state state abuse look like? What does it look like? How does what happened in Ferguson manifest here in Madison, Wisconsin? It's the same system. It just looks differently sometimes. The same violence, but it just looks different. So when I met with a few people who were also interested in doing community work, and we did some research, and we found that the jail should be the place that we start, and that's because of the numbers. Like our youth are arrested at a rate of 16-to-1 in Madison and Dane County. Black men and women are arrested at a rate of 11-to-1. We commit crimes the same across all platforms, whether it's drug usage or violent crimes or theft or petty crimes, misdemeanors, federal felons or whatever. White and black folks are quite equal in how much we commit crimes, especially in this area. And black people in Madison make up less than 6% of the population, but we make up 50% of the Dane County jail at any given moment. Yeah, so given our population here and then the population within the prison, something's wrong. And the very definition of institutionalized racism is disparity rates. So we know that there's huge discrepancies and disparities in how often we're arrested and what we're arrested for, which leads to these rates of 16-to-1 and 11-to-1. So that's the platform we chose to kind of fight it to begin, and the main reason is because there was a jail they're still going to build a jail. 2 years, 3 years we've been fighting this jail renovation. But when we started, they had $167 million on the table to expand Dane County Jail. So that's where we started, fighting against that jail, organizing, mobilizing against that happening. And we had some successes. I mean, it didn't happen. They didn't build the jail. We're still fighting it. But then Tony Robinson was murdered on March 6, 2015, which took our campaign to a different place, and our focus to a different place. Our campaign and our energy went to supporting the family of Tony Robinson and fighting for justice for him and holding the police accountable and making sure that the community was aware of what was happening and aware of the different narratives that was involved in the murder of Robinson. So from there, we went on to campaign against solitary confinement, because we know that black people are disproportionately placed in solitary confinement in jails. Most folks are people who have mental wellness challenges, that are held in these cells and re-traumatized. And we know through studies and psychology that when you lock someone up and hold them in a cell by themselves without human contact, that it actually aggravates and it just makes the problem worse. Right. Even if they didn't come in there with a mental wellness issue or a challenge, they most likely will leave with one who wants to take them in that cell. So our campaign was to end solitary confinement, to free 350 black people. That was part of our campaign from the Dane County Jail, and that was based on the numbers of us being at 50% of the population at any given day at Dane County. So we were saying, like, if there was no institutionalized racism, then the population within the jail should reflect the population outside the jail. So there should only be 5 or 6% of people in that jail that look like us. Right, it's 50%. So then we said you need to release 350 people from that jail that have been arrested on Trump charges, on petty crimes, surviving property, maybe for trespassing, loitering, petty crimes. So we're saying free 350 black people. That's how you address institutionalized racism. You don't wait 20, 30, 50 years for something, a policy or law to change. You deal with it radically, and immediately. So that's where our campaign came from, the free 350 black people.
So do you think you guys have made progress in that?
No, not at all. I think we've made progress in terms of holding the police accountable and engaging the community as part of conversations to know what's happening within the jail, and what's happening with the renovations, and what's happening with the keeping folks safe. Like, there's more accountability there because now public outpour, people are watching, so they have to work a little harder, but I don't think that's really, it didn't change anything, Doing this kind of community work, it feels like at times you're digging in the sand, Every time you dig, some stuff falls in, so.
I'll give a personal response and a professional response. So working at a predominantly white institution as a black woman, or someone who identifies as a black woman, where the majority of my colleagues are white. I would say on a personal note, I don't holistically feel that that's something that's necessarily addressed or brought up outside of my closer allies or colleagues that I identify as allies with. So oftentimes coming to campus as someone who proudly embraces and supports the Black Lives Matter movement and the work that they do and what they stand for, it can become a little frustrating and troubling being at a workplace where, say, you know, the night before one of my brothers or sisters might have been murdered through police brutality, and then to come to work and because it's so reoccurring, feeling stress or anxiety because of that, and those reoccurring events, and then coming to work and being expected to perform as though what's happening outside in the world isn't really happening, and then seeing your colleagues who may not be, at least outwardly, or may not express that they are as affected by it, kind of makes you feel a little bit of alone, like you're the only one who's kind of dealing with that or having those thoughts, because everyone else, oh, it's a great day, or happy Wednesday, happy Monday, and you're like, how is it happy? Like, my people are dying left and right, or being murdered left and right. So on a personal note, it can definitely be pretty challenging here at Edgewood, because I don't think that I mean, everything impacts people differently, but given the majority population here on campus, similar to those experiences that students share with me that I work closely with, I would say it's the same as a staff member of color, and not really, and just feeling alone in terms of my experiences and the impact that those events have on me, or my level of support and interest of the Black Lives Matter, just kind of feeling like that's something I can talk about with my friends or my family, but when I'm at work, aside from kind of my close-knit support group and my allies here on campus, it's not something that generally folks are bringing up on their own. So that's more personally, and then professionally, within my role of supporting and advocating for underrepresented student populations on campus. I guess just kind of hearing the question makes me think of my first year here, when a lot of the killings were kind of starting to immerse and be kind of televised nationally, and when Black Student Union put together the walkout and the protest. So BSU planned a walkout that they were trying to get the campus community to kind of be a part of, and then from there they were going to be going downtown to support the Black Lives Matter movement and protest that was happening downtown. And I just think about all of the things that kind of occurred alongside that and kind of the aftermath of that. So then we had the students who wanted to protest kind of right alongside the Blue Lives Matter, and wanting to support the police, and just the dynamics and just honestly the racial tension that we saw bubble up, that I think has always been present on campus, but because there's never really been an incident for folks to kind of really respond to, this really brought a lot of that to light, and I think it really made visible kind of how the world kind of works, and how those divisions between race can be seen. I think we really got our first real taste of that here at Edgewood, in terms of at least my experience here, and how that, you know, like the graffiti on the posters, and how that impacted students who were and are really all for the Black Lives Matter, and to know that there were people who within their Edgewood community, and even on their living floor of their residence halls who would do such hateful things, really brought fear and sadness, I think, in students to realize that it's not just happening around the world, but it's also here, right here on our campus. Trying to think. And we've also, again, within this office, have supported transportation to other protests that have been kind of led by whether it's Young, Gifted, and Black in correlation or partnership with the Black Lives Matter greater movement. And two, kind of more on a positive note, being proud of the passion that students who are advocating for, and not just our Black students, but allies who kind of supported them through that, both students and faculty and staff, whether it was the walkout or the protests or kind of the closed conversations that we've had in here, especially after the execution of Tony Robinson. That really hit home here too. And so I guess also professionally glad and grateful that students at least have this space to come and talk about and reflect and have dialogue on topics or issues that maybe not everyone here on campus wants to put time into, but that they know that it's available to them. So I'm glad that we at least provide that outlet for students and faculty and staff.
So, we have our challenges. We have one of the highest incarceration rates in the country among African American men. We have one of the highest academic achievement gap in the country. But we have some good things about our city, right? Fourth safest city in the United States, one of the best places in America to live. But in order for us to become a great city, a great state, we have to address these disparities. And so I think you need groups of people working together to help solve the systemic issues. My programs at Boys and Girls Club won't solve these issues. Now, we might be able to help hundreds of kids and maybe 1,000 or so, but systemically we won't change these issues that's been occurring in communities like this all over the country for decades. And so to me, working with groups like whether it's the Rotary Club, Black Lives Matter, the business community, the police department around solving these issues is how we're going to get it done for young people and how we'll get it done for families and ultimately making our community stronger. So to me, it's about empowerment. It's about changing the lives of those who are voiceless. And at the end of the day, it's about moving the needle and having groups who can challenge the status quo. And I think that's what this movement should be.
From my perspective, the way in which, first of all, the way in which Catholic theologians are studying social justice, Catholic social teaching, no one who is writing or teaching today can ignore the movement. Because what it has done, it has recaptured some of the best of the language of liberation theology. It's re-identified some of the central teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King and the whole civil rights movement, which was largely religiously inspired in the 1950s and 60s. And it has come to the realization that that awareness of justice, of the dignity of every human person, has so permeated the society that people don't need to base this belief anymore in religion. It is based in the human experience, which transcends whether or not somebody is a believer in any religious tradition. And yet the people in the Black Lives Matter movement keep on, even though they don't claim to be a religious organization, they use the language of liberation theology. They quote, many times you'll hear them use Dr. King's expression, the beloved community, working for justice, working for the body of every human being, not just those who are at the top of the hierarchical pyramids. And from what I can tell among Catholic theologians, scholars of religion, Pope Francis's encyclical makes references to exactly the same thing. And his discussion of integral ecology, it's right up there in front. Everybody's life matters. He's cognizant of the impact that Black Lives Matter has made on the discussions, on the conversations. It's no longer enough to simply acknowledge, oh yeah, everybody should be treated equally. No, now theology has to come to grips with the fact that 50 years, 60 years after the Civil Rights Movement, racism still persists. Black men are still being killed. And it's got to affect the way in which we talk about what does God want. And that basically is what we do in theology, is discern what is the will of God in this instance. And nobody can ignore it anymore. It's just too important. It's just too important to pretend that it's not central to what we've been talking about all along. What does God want in the world today?
I just got notified of this in Idaho. This kid was raped. This black boy was raped by students and other students. Male students, white students, and they have been bullying him and taunting him and calling him N-words and just, you know, throwing racial slurs his way. And then they caught him by the locker room or something and raped him, pulled down his pants and stuck a hanger up his butt. And not only did they stick the hanger up the boy's butt, but they kept kicking the hanger. So once it was in his butt, they would like kick it, like stuffed it, and make sure. So there's all kind of damage to this young man, and it's that type of behavior is sick, you know, it's disturbing, you know. So I say, like, with the Black Lives Matter, I say that to say that with the Black Lives Matter movement, you become more aware, you know, you no longer, it's hard to walk in ignorance because, you know, Black Lives Matter is really a marketing strategy to say, hey, these lives matter, look what's happening over here, look, this is like dehumanizing, this is sick, like this is not okay, like that's how I feel about Black Lives Matter movement, that it brought all these terrible things to the surface. That's always happened, right? It can always happen, but I think ignorance is bliss. Right. When you can walk around, whether you're white or black, when you can walk around in the space in the world and not be aware of these things, your life is much easier. But now that you're made aware, it's almost it's traumatizing. It's like, as a black person, it's like every day you wake up knowing that another black person was murdered, or hearing another story about some little kid being like raped and a hanger stuff up their butt, basically because of the color of their skin. So for me, it's like I have to balance like knowing the truth, fighting for, you know, justice, liberation, and also like balancing, like accepting, right? Like just it is what it is, because some days I can feel really hopeful, and other days I feel really depleted and like there's no hope. Like this world is effed up, white people effed up. Like whiteness is a sickness. Like this is sick that people can like operate and watch other people like be killed, you know, and be lacking resources and opportunities and everything, and just be treated like animals. And our response to it is, he should have obeyed. He should have obeyed the police in his own backyard. But white people don't live by those same standards, you know, because they don't have to, right? Right. They can approach the police, they can say, no, I'm not going to do that, you're violating my rights. They can insert their rights and say, I have rights. But as a black person, a brown person in the United States, it's very clear that those same rights aren't ours, right? Like we have liberties, but we don't have freedoms. You know what I mean?
Right, even though they kind of say we all have freedoms.
So it's hard. hard, like waking up to that reality and fighting it and standing in a place of love, right? Because it's not like it's not like I hate white people or I hate the systems in which we all participate, and I hate the ignorance behind it, and that's whether you're black or white. Because there's plenty of black people too who carry that torch, right? Of white supremacy, who regurgitate these narratives and support policies and systems that create the type of environment like the ghettos, right? And then say, let's fight, let's do this war on drugs. But the only war that's really happening is between the police and families. Because if it was really war on drugs, then shit, it would just stop the cargo from coming in, right? It would stop the planes and boats from shipping this shit. It would stop the guns from being shipped in, because it ain't the brother standing in the corner, it's like supplying it, you know, right?
It's someone else behind the scene.
Right.
Right.
So it's just hard because people don't want to know the truth.
It's super complicated when you're on a campus because, I mean, we have freedom of speech. So just as students want to say Black Lives Matter, students legally have a right to say all lives matter. So I'll first say that. And I think that becomes very difficult when you're in a position or in a career where maybe your personal interests don't always match with the institutional or legal policies in place. Because I do think, yes, students should have freedom of speech, but at the same time I think that I do believe, I mean, obviously all lives matter, but I won't chant that in response to Black Lives Matter, because in my mind and in my perception and my experience and beliefs, that is kind of counter-arguing Black Lives Matter, or trying to silence or diminish the voice and the point that Black Lives Matter movement tries to make. And everyone has their different reasonings for advocating for all lives matter in place of Black Lives Matter, and I think that can vary from that they're just downright racist. There are racist people in this world. I wouldn't doubt that there are racist people on this campus, all the way to just folks not fully understanding and taking the time to educate themselves on things that are not included in our K-12 education, that clearly identify the reasonings of why our nation is in the state that it's in and why we have the racial tension that exists. And normally I don't, whether it's social media or personal conversations, professional conversations, for me and my self-care, I don't engage in going back and forth with people, because that's not healthy for me. I know for some people that can help them in processing all of this, but I choose to ignore those comments as best as I can. But what I would say, as someone in this role and someone who works in the field of diversity and inclusion, and who is passionate about education, is just educate yourself as you would do anything else that you don't know about, while making sure that the sources that you're getting your education from are valid, because anyone can put anything on Google, and that doesn't mean that it's accurate, i.e. Wikipedia students. But seriously though, I mean, I think you really have to take the time to really educate yourself. And on the flip end, for someone who, as hard as it is for me to understand that ignorance and not agree with it, having to kind of sometimes step back and not excuse, but to understand that a lot of the history of Black people, my people that I know, I was privileged enough to make it to college to take courses that are specifically on that topic, while also being privileged to have parents who also educated me on some of those topics, and just myself educating myself, always educating myself, whether it's for personal reasons or for my career and my position here, to understand that someone who does not identify as being Black, has never been taught any of this information in their K-12 experience, probably might not have had any interactions or experiences with Black people up until maybe now in college, and being able to have compassion for their ignorance in a sense, which is really hard oftentimes, but I'm a spiritual person, so it's not so hard for me. It can be frustrating, but I know that I always try to see things with compassion and understanding. And so some people are privileged where this doesn't impact them, it doesn't impact their life, it doesn't throw off their routine, it's not any of their brothers and sisters or people who look like them, and they don't walk out of the house in fear that this could be the last day that they are alive should they interact with police or someone who hates them because of the color of their skin. So who wouldn't want to live a life like that, where you don't have to live in fear and constant fear and constantly putting on a shield or your armor to protect yourself. And so when you don't have to live that way and you don't have to constantly think about these things, then yes, you will be ignorant, and it will be hard for you to understand the lives of those who every day have to experience that and every day have to put their armor and their shield on. So it's almost like we're living in two different vortexes or something through our experiences based on our physical appearance, more specifically the color of our skin.
I think that in continuity with the civil rights movement, but having an even greater impact because of the way that social media works in our culture today, more people are going to be on board with this fight for justice. There were a lot of people of various ethnic groups who supported the civil rights movement, who marched with Dr. King. And that's part of the beauty and the glory of the story of the civil rights movement. That's people from so many different traditions, religious traditions, supported the civil rights movement. But it seems that it's moved beyond religion in a way that still captures the passion that comes from a conviction that this is the right thing to do. The religions would say this is the right thing to do because it's God's will. But for those people who don't even believe in God, who have no affiliation with any religious tradition, the Black Lives Movement has made it possible for people to tap into the best of all the religious traditions that advocate compassion and the end of suffering and the equality of people and sufficient life and fullness and freedom for everyone, which is common in all the religions. And yet people who don't have religion are using that same language. So the vision of paradise, the vision of the reign of God, the vision of the beloved community has captured the imaginations of people beyond religion. And that's to me, that's an indicator that, okay, this is where we need to be putting our focus. We need to be collaborating because it seems the whole planet has become aware now of what the early religious leaders of the civil rights movement were saying. This is God's will. And so it seems people need to put down their religious antagonism towards each other and towards people who don't have any religion and really start to collaborate on this. We've got to find solutions. It was human beings who created racism. It was human beings who created all the structures, the political structures, the criminal justice structures. All of these were created at a time when white people were in charge of the world. But that's got to come to an end. And human beings have to work together in order to build that beloved community. And I think that's where we are. Black Lives Matter raised the awareness and has this uncanny ability to make people take another look and perhaps realize we can't go on. We can't go on the way we've been doing. It's got to change.
Absolutely not, especially not by the system. Right? To like the police department. Chief Hobart, for example, we're much, he considers us nothing, you know, just agitators with big mouths who are emotional, right? Because you can that's part of, you know, white privilege and racism too, is that you can dismiss people because of their emotions behind what they're saying, you know, and then they can say, well, you're not being professional, you know, or you're not being, you're making it really difficult for us to communicate in an intellectual way because of your emotions.
So, what methods have you guys come up with so far, or what progress have you guys made?
It's a great question. So I think about, we met with all the police chiefs in Dane County around their use of force policies. So, you know, you want to stop African American men from being killed. How do we look at the policies that exist on the books? How do we talk to young people about how to engage with law enforcement officials? So we worked with United Way over the last year, and leaders of color, including the Latino community, the African American community, and sat down with the University of Wisconsin and other groups to say, let's look at these use of force policies and let's come up with some recommendations. That group was led by the chief of police from UW-Madison, Everett Mitchell, who's also an advisor to Young Gifted and Black, and they led that coalition of community leaders and law enforcement officials to come up with what I believe was 155 recommendations on how to minimize these kinds of issues from happening in Dane County. The other thing I see that in terms of working with the police department, in the community we introduced what we call a 15-point plan that focuses on a couple of things: youth mentoring, employment opportunities for young people and their families, reentry services. As a country, we spend a ton of money on federal prisons and state and municipal lockup facilities. You know, we spend here in Dane County almost $40,000 a year to incarcerate someone. So how do we begin to reduce that cost and begin to educate, whether it's young people or older adults, on how to live a productive lifestyle? So we came up with this 15-point plan where we included law enforcement community, people from the community, around specific recommendations and investments to begin to move the needle on some of these issues.
Lives Matter movement has helped this, but I see this in many different ways. But it just, as different incidents or situations occur on campus with students that I support and advocate for, I'm reminded daily on not just my purpose as the Director of Student Diversity and Inclusion, but again, because I'm a spiritual person, my purpose being placed here at Edgewood and the relationships that I have with students and how important I am and my role is for you all, being someone that you can confide in, who is a representation of you, who gets it. So if you come in here and you're just like, man, in just tears, I can understand that and I can feel that because I empathize with you, because our experiences are probably very mutual and similar. And I know based on the traffic that I get in here that's essential for many students, and so I'm grateful to be in that position. So I've learned that sometimes it's greater than you and it's greater than everything that's happening out in the world, but I'm very humbled for the opportunity to have such an impact on the lives of students, specifically students of color here on campus. And then on the flip side of that, as I'm going into my third year and have what I feel established myself in my role, even though that kind of changes every day too with kind of some of the demands, but I'm always trying to figure out, yes, how can I don't need to figure out how to support my students of color. I've got that down. I can do that with my eyes closed and my hands tied behind my back. But what this movement and other incidents that have occurred across the nation, as well as the Madison community, as well as right here within the gates of Edgewood, is how, in my role, can I not only be a support person for our underrepresented students and our students of color, but how can I use this, what I call, a gift and an opportunity that God has given me to impact our white students, so that when they leave here, they are that much more versed or comfortable or less ignorant or more of an ally for social justice than they might have come in as a freshman. And not to say that, all of our majority students know nothing about social justice and race issues. No, not at all. That's not the case. But for those who don't, or for those who aren't as engaged in those programming, or those who don't feel that what's happening in the world truly will impact and does impact them and their lives and their futures, how do I get them to see that? How can I create programming? How can I create or organize, student worker positions or events or activities that's going to want them to want to learn more, want them to be a part of the change that is oh so needed in the world that we live in, even if it's just starting here at Edgewood, so that whether they are going into the field of being a doctor or a teacher or a lawyer or whatever the case may be, engineer, they know they are better able to communicate with people that don't look like them or share the same beliefs and experiences as them. How can they go in without having implicit bias and just making assumptions right off the bat for people that they might serve or work with or work for in the future, because that's what I can somewhat control here in my position at Edgewood. I can't change the world, but I can help make differences and changes within individuals who might be able to spread that change with those that they interact with or come across in life.
I think the best advice for any black person is to remember that black love is revolutionary. And I say to remember black love is revolutionary. That includes loving yourself, protecting yourself, defining your own boundaries, taking care of yourself. And taking care of yourself means like you defining who you are and valuing and accepting all that you are, that's part of our black revolution, is accepting us so that when we are in situations, whether it be hanging out with friends that are your counterparts and they're doing something that might get you killed but get them a smack on the wrist, that we love ourselves and remember, like, despite this situation and these differences, like, I'm great and I'm magnificent. Like people, we come from this place of, we're the beginning, you know what I mean? Like, we're the beginning, and when we learn our history, when we learn our stories, we learn of our greatness, we learn of our own competence, our own abilities, because then we can look back and stand on the shoulders of our ancestors and say, damn, we're amazing. So I say that to say that in any and all situations, remember where you come from, and always default to the side that puts you first. And not in a narcissistic, egotistical way, but put you first, meaning that you take care of you first.
First say that I'm right there with you. So I experience it, the weight and the stress, working, being a mother of a black girl, being in school and having to focus on all that while these huge atrocities are happening to our people. So I will first say I'm not an expert, and I don't have all the answers, because I too am learning how to cope and deal with that daily. And also just the importance of mental health and self-care. Self-care is different for everyone, what that looks like. For some people it's secluding themselves and staying alone until they can kind of get their mind right. For some people it's working out. For some people it's listening to music. For some people it's writing. For some people it's getting out and being active and protesting. For some people it's going into a field that they know they can make a difference. Whatever it is I encourage students to figure out what their self-care is and practice that daily, weekly, hourly sometimes, depending on the day. Whatever it is that students have to do so that they don't lose themselves while still continuing to progress in their school and their life. Make time for self-care. And if you're not sure what that is, seek out resources that can help you figure that out, so that you're not just completely depressed and stressed out and numb and just frozen, because that's not going to be helpful for them or for the world. But also always be true to yourself.
My message to African American young men and boys is do as much as you can to prepare yourself for your future. So whether it be education or gaining some technical skills, surrounding yourself with a network that can support you professionally and socially, and staying out of harm's way. And then if you're in a controversy, whether it's with someone else, live another day to tell your story. And that goes across the board. So whether it's a conflict with a law enforcement or conflict with another man, live another day to tell your story. And that would be my advice. There are strong, talented, young African American men who are brilliant. But a lot of men that look like me and you, lives have been cut short because of conflict. And I want to see more African American men as CEOs, as teachers, as business owners, as investors, as philanthropists, as scientists, as principals. African American men are strong. And I want to see them again live another day to tell their story.
Thank you so much.
All right?
Appreciate it.
All right, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Glenna. That's all we have today. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you, John, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Martin Luther King to work tirelessly and nonviolently to dismantle the legal institutions of segregation and oppression. As we celebrate his memory, fill us with your compassion for all who suffer and your passion for justice, that we may join all the saints in establishing your reign on earth as it is in heaven. For yours is the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Was only 7 years old. Today we will boldly name the unjust and shamelessly prejudiced acts throughout our nation. Yet we need to remain conscious that we too have been unjust in our ignorance by allowing individuals in our community who feel like their life doesn't matter. Together we will proclaim the value of black bodies. We will deconstruct the discriminating stereotypes that have legalized black death, criminalize our black boys and girls, and dehumanize our women and men. Together we will proclaim Black Lives Matter. For the mother who is still grieving the child she will never hold again, we will proclaim Black Lives Matter. For the father who feels forced to teach his son how to hold his head down rather than hold his head up, we will proclaim Black Lives Matter. For the sister who is doubly subjugated because of her skin and gender, is labeled ugly by outsiders and unworthy by her own community, we will proclaim Black
Lives Matters.
We must proclaim that Black justice matters, Black freedom matters, and Black lives matter. This is not an issue of proximity. We carry Ferguson's struggle with us. We carry New York's pain, and we stand with that. James Brissett, Miriam Carey,
Raynell Allen,
Nehemiah Wood, Lakia Moy, Chantel Davis,
Wayne Carrington,
Yvette Smith,
Timothy Stansbury Jr.,
Irvin Johnson,
Sean Bell,
Dante Price,
Travis Carter, Osman Songo,
Larry Eugene Jack, and Regina Doucette.
Earl Murray,
Kenneth Harding,
Eric Gardner,
Alonzo Ashley, and Tamar Rice.
Timothy Thomas,
Johnny Mahi Warren,
Kendrick Madate,
Akai Gurley,
Mackenzie Cochran,
Michael Brown,
Alberto Sproul, Patrick Dorisman,
Tyree Woodson, Victor Steen,
Irvin Jefferson,
Stephen Eugene Washington,
Orlando Barlow,
Aaron Campbell,
Monty Gray,
Ronald Beasley,
January Henry, Rusty Brown,
Ronald Madison.
Austin Lynch. Now for a moment of silence.
Black Lives Matter.